With the dust settled from free agency and 2026 rosters beginning to take shape, there is still, I would say, one massive shift for all teams still yet to take place, which of course is the NFL draft. And that's where we'll begin to shift our focus this offseason. I'm John Macri, joined as always by PFF's lead fantasy analyst, Nathan Jahnke. And for this episode of the PFF Fantasy Podcast, we'll be talking about our ideal landing spots for the incoming rookie class. We each have our own picks, so we'll see where we differ and where we agree, but it should be fun to kind of play some off-season fantasy roster management. So Nate, how are you, good sir?
I'm doing well. We talked about free agency a week ago. There were still a couple other moves that happened here and there. It seemed like the quarterbacks, running backs, and tight ends, all the major moves have already happened. Wide receiver seems like the one key position where there's still a lot that could happen. But I think that also speaks to this upcoming rookie class. So a lot of teams need a wide receiver. We'll probably see plenty of teams draft wide receivers, probably over half the league drafting wide receivers this year. And then it might be a while before we find out some landing spots for some of the remaining free agent wide receivers.
Yeah, it's always interesting this time of year, but after free agency, like it feels like a lot of the, at least like I felt at least like running back spots really kind of got filled up. As far as like the true ideal ones, like Kansas City obviously brought in Kenneth Walker. You got the Saints signing Travis Etienne, right? Tampa Bay, they added Kenneth Gainwell, but they already had Bucky Irving. Breece Hall got a franchise tag, right? So there's all these kind of spots that I think could have been really good, but I think there's still some that we can work with here as we're looking at potential fits for our rookies. And we literally just talked about the free agency moves last week. We talked about the team needs and potential fits the week before that. And again, now that the dust has kind of settled and we start to transition into this rookie season, we figured this would kind of be a good way to talk about the teams where there's still maybe a need for certain positions that could be fantasy friendly and provide some positive outlook for our incoming rookies. And we both came up with our top landing spots for running back, wide receiver, quarterback, and tight end. And we'll compare here, talk about why we like them, put our kind of hopes and dreams out into the world for the 2026 rookie class so that they can become fantasy stars. So Nate, what do you say we get into it here? And we'll start with the running backs because we've already, kind of been on that conversation. So tell me your number one spot for a rookie running back right now.
My number one team is the Tennessee Titans. They're the one team that I thought might address a running back in free agency. They have two running backs in the final year of their contract, Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears. Both of them could get released and provide some cap relief and not leave too much dead money. None of that happened during free agency. They didn't make any moves at running back. They made plenty of moves at other positions, but they seem to be the prime team that could get Jeremiah Love. They have the 4th overall pick in the draft. We just had a mock draft go out that had them trading up to get Love. So I think Tennessee, if they draft a running back, whether or not it's in the first round or wait till the second or third round, even though they have running backs on the depth chart, I wouldn't be surprised if they release one of their running backs or trade one of their running backs if they end up drafting one. And I think that running back could end up being a starter. And I think they're probably the only team where there's a potential for a rookie running back to come in, be the starter week one, be the starter for the entire season, even if it's not Love. I think there's plenty of other teams that could end up with Love and then he'd be the starter for the entire season. But I think Tennessee is probably the only team where a different rookie running back could come in and be the starter for the entire season, since we really don't know what this coaching staff feels about Pollard and Spears. But we do know this duo has been a little bit below average each of the two seasons that they've been the two running backs.
Nice. Yeah. That's an interesting one. That I like it. There was a few teams where like I looked at, expiring contracts at the end of this coming season here. And there's actually probably a couple here that I'm going to talk about. But yeah, Tennessee's a good one. They definitely were on the list. Not in my top 5, but it's basically a toss up for all these, potential expiring contracts in the backfield here. So I like that one. I kind of went for me where I went. I wasn't looking necessarily at where Jeremiah Love would fit in right away. Instead, I was looking at first the team that maybe needs a running back right away. I have like a Jeremiah Love spot a little bit later, but I was thinking about the team first. And where I went Chicago Bears. DeAndre Swift, we'll see what happens, right? Because if you go to like his Google News page for DeAndre Swift right now, everything is about him as a potential cut candidate, essentially. So it doesn't mean that he will be cut, but it at least has me feeling that he's not long for the Chicago Bears. We'll see what happens, and I think this was a team, even last year, that we really liked as a potential landing spot for a rookie running back, and that hasn't really changed for me. I still think it can be a prime spot. Like they picked 25th in round one, so it's too late for Love. I think it's too early for maybe some of the other backs, but they pick like 60th in round two, 89th in round three. I think it might be kind of perfect for whoever they like the most there, whether, it may be a Jonah Coleman or somebody like that, a day two back. Either way would not be, or I think it would be kind of tough not to love that spot for fantasy, because I think you can talk yourself out of DeAndre Swift being done in Chicago, even if it's not this year, probably not beyond this season, right? So I kind of liked Chicago. I think they're set up for success out of the backfield, especially with that roster. And I kind of landed on Chicago being my favorite right now.
That's fair. Like when I was going through the teams, I ended up with a good 11 to 12 teams that I could see ending up with a running back, and a lot of different definitions of why they need a running back and what would be good for that team. And for Chicago, I think they're the most upside. If a rookie ends up being the top running back in Chicago, I just think it's a rough path for a running back to get there. Like you said, there's plenty of articles talking about Swift being a cut candidate, a lot of that having to do with the salary cap space they would save by cutting him. But I think most salary cap moves have happened by this point. I know I just mentioned Tennessee as a potential one where they could release a running back after drafting a running back, but Chicago drafts a running back, say in the second or third round, I wouldn't be surprised if they're third on the depth chart to start with. Then they would have to work their way up. But if they end up playing well, then they'd end up being at the top. And then if they're at the top with Chicago's offense, with Chicago's excellent offensive line, that's probably the most upside for fantasy production out of any of the 12 or so teams that could draft a running back. I just found a hard time of them potentially getting there, especially considering the running back class. I don't think they're trading up for Love. If they did, then Love would be like a top 5 fantasy pick immediately. But if not, they're drafting, like you said, second, third, fourth round, which is where probably most of the other landing spots I have for these running backs are. So I didn't end up having Chicago in my top 5. So I think we'll have some pretty different lists. Thanks. I wouldn't be surprised if other positions we have a little bit more in common. But like you said, with the running backs, with so many teams addressing the need in free agency, then there's not many teams that absolutely, or I don't think there's really any team that absolutely needs a running back. Just a lot of teams that they could benefit from having a running back, or running back could benefit from being there.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like as much as it's a top 5, and I tried to put them in order, like it's super tight. Like I could, switch this order around by the hour, basically, depending on how I feel. So, but yeah, I still like Chicago, and you're right. I think it would have to be the right running back in that round 2 or 3, somebody that can make an immediate impact and be effective to win that starting job. But yeah, it's hard to imagine right now with this class, like anybody other than maybe Jeremiah Love that can be an immediate contributor right out the gate, especially with the way these backfields have already kind of filled up a little bit this offseason. So we'll see how things go. But Nate, tell us who your number 2 landing spot would be for a potential rookie running back.
I feel my number 2 spot's even more a little out there, and that's the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals are a team. I looked at a bunch of criteria of like why teams might need a running back, and a couple, little bit arbitrary, but it still got the Bengals to one of the clear teams that need one. Every team either had a running back with a 77 overall grade last season, or a rushing grade of at least 81, or recently invested in a running back in the first or second round, or added a running back in free agency or a trade. So a lot of different ways to view a team not necessarily needing a running back, either because they've played well or because they've invested in one recently. And the Bengals and the Titans are the 2 teams that didn't fit any of those 4 criteria. They have Chase Brown as a lead running back. He has been fine from a real life perspective. He has been very good from a fantasy perspective, because he's been among the top 5 running backs in receptions and receiving touchdowns the last 2 seasons, as well as all the work he does as a rusher with the team. I think he has been a fine running back. I think there's room for a better running back to potentially be the starter going forward. And there's definitely room for a new backup in Cincinnati. Samaje Perine has been the third down back. He'll continue to be the third down back, most likely. Will be 31 before the start of the season. He started getting more playing time as the season progressed because Chase Brown wasn't doing a great job handling so much workload that he had. And then they drafted Taj Brooks last season, but Brooks only saw playing time on offense whenever there was an injury to one of the top two running backs. Never saw the field at any point when Brown and Perine were both healthy outside of special teams play. So it doesn't seem like they trust Brooks to be the backup. So if Cincinnati were to draft a running back in, say, the second, third, or fourth round, then I think they could pretty quickly be the number 2 running back on early downs. And if they're playing better than Brown on early downs, then they can take over as the early down back, in which case there's an opportunity to be a top 10 fantasy running back there. So I think a little similar to Chicago in that they are just a very good team that could use a running back. And I think there's just an easier path for a running back to be the backup in Cincinnati and then the starter, where in Chicago, I think they have to overcome both Swift and Kyle Monangai. But I think the Bengals also a good landing spot, not quite as much for their offensive line, but more so just because their offense is so good and their defense not as good. So the offense gets a lot of volume and scores a lot of touchdowns and all that.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a lot of fun, right? Like I like Chase Brown. I think, yeah, I can't imagine they spend whatever they're drafting 10th overall, something like that. Like I can't imagine they spend a pick on Jeremiah Love. There's just too many other needs for that team that I if they spent on running back, as fun as that would be for fantasy, I can't imagine them doing it in the first round. But like you said, maybe round 2, round 3, maybe there's somebody there that they like who has some potential that can move up the depth chart. Because yeah, that could absolutely work. Again, we really like the Bengals offense. Again, not the offensive line so much, but hopefully they can continue to address that. But yeah, that could be a fun one. I went with the Washington Commanders. So we kind of talked about them, I guess, a couple weeks ago, right, when we were talking about ideal fits. But they obviously just signed Rachaad White. That's just a 1-year deal. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt still there. A fine back, but not somebody that they invested in a ton. They're picking. Oh, well, I'll talk about where the earliest pick first, but or later. But they are picking, like 71st-ish overall in round 3. Like if you're looking at a more realistic spot for them to spend on running back, because we did talk about Washington as a favorite spot for. I liked it for Kenneth Walker. I kind of feel still the same post free agency here as a spot for somebody to come into that backfield. Like you can bring in a young, promising rookie and kind of ease them into that eventual RB1 role in that offense behind Rachaad White and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, at least at first, because I don't think scare you that job is kind of unwinnable, right? And if they do want to really get nuts, Jeremiah Love at like 7th overall. He's currently the 6th overall pick from mock drafts at this point, especially because I feel like top 5 is probably too rich for the running back position. The Browns, they're at 6. They drafted 2 running backs last year with decent capital. The Saints and the Chiefs, they're drafting right behind Washington, but they spent big at running back in free agency. Bengals are picking 10th. Like I said, I don't think they should be spending a high pick on a running back, at least a first round pick. There's been some talk about like a Chase Brown extension. I don't know if that'll actually go through or not, but I think, if Jeremiah Love is going to go top 10, barring, somebody trading up to get him, I feel like Washington is the best fit for him and could be an immediate impact player. So yeah, I mean, Jaden Daniels obviously being healthy would help. Same thing with Terry McLaurin in that offense. Maybe they can still add wide receiver as well. But I think I would like Jeremiah Love quite a bit in Washington. But even if it's like, a day 2 back, I don't think you're overly scared of, again, Rachaad White, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt for somebody. If you really like the running back and think they have potential, I don't think we should be too scared to draft them in rookie drafts, because I think there's a path there at least over time and as soon as year 1. So I put the Washington Commanders at 2, Nate. How do you feel about that one?
I think that's fair. Like I said, I came up with about 12 teams, and that's one of the ones that I came up with. I think this is a fun exercise because you're trying to balance a couple different things here. One is how good is the landing spot if the rookie were to see playing time, taking into account the offense, the offensive line, those kind of things. Another is the path to playing time. How easily could someone become the starter, which I took into account quite a bit of just how quickly can someone find playing time. And then there's how likely is that team to get one of those running backs. And like you said, there's a chance that if he lands at 7, they could draft him at 7. I was just concerned that Washington might not draft a running back because they've added a couple of veterans recently rather than just White and Krosky Merritt. They also added Jerome Ford. So Ford is on the roster. They also yesterday brought back Jeremy McNichols. So right now they have 4 veteran running backs on the roster. That kind of told me that they don't think they will get Love at 7. I think if they thought that, they wouldn't be getting so many running backs. It sounds like he's going to go top 5. That's what I'm guessing he's going to end up. So Washington would need to trade up to get him, I think. And then I think there's still a chance that they draft a running back later. But the fact that they've added so many veterans tells me that they might not end up getting a rookie. And yeah, they don't have maybe the long-term solution at running back on the roster currently, but since they've added so many different pieces, we could see those pieces all having some kind of role this season. But Washington similarly had 4 veteran running backs last season and ended up drafting Krosky Merritt at the end of the draft, and he ended up factoring in. So certainly a chance a running back gets involved, in which case there's a path to playing time. I just didn't include Washington in my top 5 because they've added 3 running backs in the last week plus. So that tells me I don't think they are planning on prioritizing running back, at least in the draft.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Again, like you said, Jerome Ford and Rachaad White, those guys, I think are serviceable as kind of a whole. And just thinking about one spot in particular where I think a star running back could make an impact. But yeah, I agree. I think there's so many different possibilities for all these different teams that especially Jeremiah Love. Like I feel like, I don't know. I mean, if he's gonna go top 5 would be, I don't know. That's maybe it happens, but we'll see. Anyways, tell me who your number 3 landing spot was for a running back sneak.
Sure. So this is one that we might have agreement in the top 5, and that's the Seattle Seahawks. We'll see if you included Seattle in the top 5. But they had the duo of Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. Walker left in free agency. Charbonnet tore his ACL in January, didn't have surgery until February, and typical recovery time means I think, late October at the earliest is when we could expect him back, and maybe not until December. And even then, anytime in that time range, he might not be the player he once was. And all they've done so far is add Emmanuel Wilson in free agency from the Green Bay Packers. So there is a clear short-term need for a running back, but I think that could also potentially turn into a long-term need in that Charbonnet shared the backfield with Walker all last season. There's a chance that they could continue using 2 running backs. So I think there's definitely room for a rookie running back to get involved. The Seattle offense relies heavily on the run game. The Seattle team is very good, so they're running a lot late in games. So it is a good situation for whoever's ending up running the ball there. I just also wouldn't be surprised if they add another veteran. I think there's at least a few veteran running backs who are still available in free agency, guys that we're not expecting to be starters going forward, but I don't see them going into the season with just Wilson and the other guys that they currently have on the roster. So whether it's a rookie or another veteran or both, there's room for more running backs to be fantasy relevant early on in the season in Seattle.
Yep, I'm 100% with you. Seattle's in my top 5 here. And yeah, I mean, like you said, it's hard to imagine that they don't bring in somebody, right? Emmanuel Wilson, not really extended time as a starter ever in the NFL, mostly handled, backup duties while he was in Green Bay. He's filled in a few times, but that's really about it. And Charbonnet, who knows how long it's going to take him to recover from the ACL, is going to be effective right away when he comes back as well. So this is obviously a Super Bowl winning team. They don't want to have those holes in their offense, especially, right? And with Kenneth Walker gone, I think it makes perfect sense that they do look to add somebody, obviously picking at the end of the first, end of the second, end of the third. I think think, obviously not end of the first necessarily, but that day 2 picks, I think could be perfectly fine for somebody to come in and be their next starting running back, and we'll see what happens. Maybe they still believe Charbonnet can be that guy, but coming off injury, it's a little bit harder. So, yep, I'm with you absolutely. I think Seattle is a great spot for somebody to come in and potentially make an impact right away. Okay, well, I'll jump to, I guess, my next. I'll cross out Seattle, and I want to talk about Minnesota too. We know Aaron Jones kind of got restructured, so he's not going to be cut like the rumors had kind of said. Right, it does seem like he's going to stay on the team this year. Jordan Mason also still on the team, but talking about teams that have expiring contracts, right? Both Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason could be gone by next season, right? So Minnesota, again, another offense that I think has potential. We'll see what happens at the quarterback position. But I think that also could be one of those spots where somebody could come in and be kind of their, succession plan out of the backfield. And obviously maybe not as easy this year, but they have these kind of mid-second, mid-third round picks. I think third round, somewhere around there would be a decent spot for somebody who I think there are serviceable running backs that have potential going in that range, but I think we'd have to be patient with them because year one won't be easy to get those touches, barring injuries. And both of those starters have dealt with injuries. So maybe, but again, another spot that I don't think I would hate for a running back hopeful in this class. And I could see myself, getting behind whoever ends up landing there. If I like that running back in Minnesota, just again, Aaron Jones getting older as well, but Jordan Mason, we'll see if they, he extends or anything like that. But I think there's a path there for the long term for a rookie running back. How do you feel about Minnesota, Nate?
I agree. A long-term running back definitely fits there, especially I don't see Aaron Jones being back after this season. Jordan Mason, I could see signing maybe not an extension before the season, but if he plays well enough, an extension after the season. I looked more short-term for my running backs, and especially I think there were a lot of teams that addressed running back in free agency. A team like Arizona, hopefully they're not the next one on your list, but a team that has multiple running backs, but I think there's a path to a running back being the starter there as early as next season. But also if they draft a running back, they could be fourth on the depth chart this season. So I kind of avoided some of those teams that I'm focused more on the short term, who I think could end up being fantasy starters at some point in the 2026 season. But I agree, if you're looking more at 2027 and beyond, Minnesota definitely belongs on this list.
Cool. Yeah, that's kind of a fun way to do it too, right? I was thinking kind of long term for a lot of mine, and you got the short term, so it did create a nice mix of teams in our list here. So fun way to kind of look at it. And so far the only overlap really has been Seattle. We got teams that are similar on our full list, but I think as far as top 5 goes, not a ton of overlap because we're looking at it a little bit differently, right? So and Minnesota could be fun. Oh yeah, I guess. Tell me your next pick for running back.
Oh yeah, so my fourth team on the list, I think we'll have more agreement at the other positions, but I don't think we'll have agreement at these last 2 spots because I ended up looking at more teams that have number 1 running backs, but don't have number 2 running backs at this point. In which case, if the number 1 running back suffers an injury and then the number 2 running back becomes the starter and has a chance to be a fantasy starter pretty much immediately. The first team on that list for me is the Indianapolis Colts. They have been looking for a backup running back for Jonathan Taylor for a couple years now. Zach Moss, Trey Sermon, Tyler Goodson, Amir Abdullah, all guys over the past 3 years that have been either primary backups or just guys who have seen significant playing time over these past 3 years. All of them are free agents right now. No team has signed any of them. They took swings at DJ Giddens, Khalil Herbert last year, but they ended up going with Abdullah as their primary backup. Right now, it's just Giddens and Ulysses Bentley as the only other running backs on the roster. So I think if they drafted a running back from the 2nd to 4th round or so, they would have a very easy path to being the number 2 running back in Indianapolis. And Taylor has missed significant time in 3 of the last 4 seasons. He didn't miss too much time last season, but he's also run over 300 times each of the past 2 seasons. Lots of wear and tear, so would not be surprised if at some point in the season Taylor or ends up missing time, in which case any running back selected in the second to fourth round would go from being the backup to being the starter behind one of the best offensive lines in the NFL in an offense that relies pretty significantly on the run game. So I think there is a chance that if Indianapolis drafts a running back, which I would not be surprised if they draft one, because there is definitely a need there, that player ends up being a fantasy starter at some point during the 2026 season.
Yeah, I had considered Indianapolis as well, but I still believe in DJ Giddens, so I was like, I didn't want to put them as a spot. So I put another team that I think has obviously a locked in RB1, doesn't have a lot behind that RB1, and I went with the Baltimore Ravens. Now, Derrick Henry, obviously there. Can he last forever? Probably not, right? He's 32, or he'll be 32 at the start of the season. I know he's been awesome. He's been obviously a completely different breed, which is why he's lasted this long in the first place. But I think at some point, he's going to lose that magic, right? And Keaton Mitchell is gone. Justice Hill, not really an early down back. There's nobody really in place as like a great succession plan right now in Baltimore. They have picks in every round. I'd be surprised if they didn't add some backfield insurance. And like you said, like if Derrick Henry were to get hurt, they don't really have, just like Jonathan Taylor, if something were to happen, that's a big loss to that offense. So having somebody in there that, maybe they believe in or that is capable of carrying that workload, I think would be key. So, whether that's in round 2 or 3 or 4, whatever it happens to be, but, taking a shot on one of these, decent running backs here, and young running backs as well, to be a succession plan for Derrick Henry at some point. We'll see if he ever slows down, but I kind of like Baltimore as one of those places, similar to the way you were looking at Indianapolis.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Looking at it from a long-term perspective, that's probably better than any of the teams that I have left. Looking at more of the short-term perspective, I think the only reason I didn't include Baltimore amongst these teams that need a clear backup is Justice Hill did have a little experience as an early down back and has graded well, but like you said, not a succession plan for Derrick Henry, so they could very well need a new starting running back in 2027, in which case drafting a rookie now would make a lot of sense. I debated a couple different teams for my last spot, similar teams that like need a backup running back for sure, in which case if the starter gets injured. Dallas and the Raiders were two teams that fit for me, but I ended up with the Atlanta Falcons. They lost Tyler Algier, so they definitely need a running back. The only other backups they have on the roster right now, undrafted free agents who basically haven't seen any NFL playing time to this point, so could very well use a running back. I think they would end up being a backup for the foreseeable future because Bijan Robinson isn't going anywhere, but I kind of felt similar with Dallas and the Raiders, even though Williams, not the super long-term solution in Dallas, but he did sign a new contract that makes him on the roster at least for the next 2 seasons, potentially longer. So all short-term options, and I think Atlanta has the best offensive line of the group, best possibility of if Bijan Robinson suffers an injury, they could be a clear fantasy starter because of the offense, because of the offensive line and being built around a running back. So I think Atlanta is another good situation for a backup and a team that definitely needs to address the running back position at some point, whether it's later on in free agency or the draft.
Nice. Yeah. Those 3 teams that you mentioned were all on my next 3 teams as well. Like just as kind of the ones that were on the fringe of making it: Atlanta, Las Vegas, Dallas. Like I think there's potential there. The Raiders obviously only have Ashton Genty. Clint Kubiak's talked about, bringing in another back as well. And Atlanta for sure hasn't added any real competition as far as, replacing Tyler Algier in that backfield. So I think that makes perfect sense as a team just to add some depth behind Bijan. And then Dallas, they gave Javonte, an extension, but we'll see. And, if he can continue staying hot here the way he did this past season, we'll have to see what happens there. But I think those are all good spots. There wasn't really, I'm just looking, like there wasn't really a lot of other ones like Jacksonville, obviously losing ETN. I still like Baishal Tootin. They brought in Chris Rodriguez. So I think they could try that out at least for a year before they add any real competition. So I didn't really put them in consideration here, but I think that's kind of the running backs for me. So let's talk quarterbacks now, Nate. quarterback position, we only did a top three. Look, there's not many spots left at this point, right? Sometimes it feels like there's a lot of potential landing spots, but did you include Las Vegas as one of your teams?
I
Because
did put Las
yeah,
Vegas first because
it's fair.
they're the clear team that needs a quarterback. Everyone
Yeah.
knows that they're probably going to draft Mendoza. They've made that even more clear by not addressing the position in free agency to this point. Wouldn't be surprised if they add a veteran somewhere down the line because it sounds like they want to sit Mendoza for the start of his career and let him learn a little bit. So they'll add a veteran at some point. But the fact that they weren't in on any of the top free agent quarterbacks speaks even more to the fact that they plan on drafting Mendoza number one. So they are the clear team that needs a rookie quarterback the most, and therefore they're at the top of my list.
Yeah, no, I definitely put them at the top. I didn't know if they counted or not, but I put them there anyways. And then I added a bonus team at the end of my top three. But yeah, right now I think it's Aiden O'Connell. That's it, right? So unless they add somebody, I can't imagine that Mendoza isn't the starter this year, because it does feel like they're definitely going to take him. We'll see how he does, obviously in year one, but I don't think that I don't think they could afford taking anything other than a quarterback there and taking a shot on Mendoza. So I'm with you. I think Las Vegas, obviously the prime spot, but I got a couple other ones, but I'll be curious. Who was your second spot that you liked as a potential quarterback spot?
Number two was also relatively easy for me. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers because Aaron Rodgers hasn't decided if he's coming back or not. Mason Rudolph and Will Howard are the two quarterbacks there. But if Rodgers doesn't return, there's plenty of other veteran quarterbacks who could go there. Kirk Cousins, Tyrod Taylor, Jimmy Garoppolo, Russell Wilson, Joe Flacco, Derek Carr, Carson Wentz, lots of veteran quarterbacks. Regardless of who they pick out of any of those guys, if it's not Rodgers, they're still going to have one of the oldest quarterbacks in the NFL, in which case they will still need a quarterback of the future. So regardless of what they do, it could make sense for them to draft a quarterback of the future in this draft. So Pittsburgh, whether it's for the short term or the long term, they made a lot of sense here.
Yep, I had the exact one for my number two spot, because who knows what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers when he'll make his decision. I wouldn't be surprised if it's after the draft. Who knows what'll happen there? But like you said, Mason Rudolph, Will Howard. They traded for Michael Pittman. They got DK Metcalf there. They don't really have a starting worthy quarterback. And not necessarily saying that there are starting worthy quarterbacks beyond Fernando Mendoza in the draft. We'll see how they feel about, guys like Tyus Simpson or Garrett Nussmeier or whoever it ends up being. But this is a team that I think, is typically a playoff contender every year. We'll see if that continues without Mike Tomlin, but defense is definitely competitive. They got some pieces on offense. So I think, the quarterback position is absolutely a need there for the Steelers. So my other team, we'll see if you have the same one. I put the New York Jets. They just signed Geno Smith, okay, but they traded Justin Fields, and for me, we'll see what happens with Geno Smith. Obviously, it was a down year, but it was also a bad situation. This is another not great situation, obviously, for the Jets and that offense. They have Garrett Wilson, obviously, but I would love to see somebody be able to, get the most out of Garrett Wilson. He signed that contract extension as well. I think it was 4 years, a contract extension this past offseason. So Garrett Wilson's going to be there. He needs somebody to be able to get them the ball. Could they, surprise with, I think it's the 16th overall pick, maybe it's the 44th overall pick, and they take like a Ty Simpson or again, Garrett Nussmeier or Drew Aller, whoever they view in that kind of QB 2 to 4 range, if they think that's somebody that they can develop behind Geno Smith for at least the foreseeable future. I think that this is a team that has to keep looking at the position and taking shots, and maybe Geno works out and that's great, but worst case, at least you have another option to fill in there and give that fan base some hope as well, because the quarterback position, it's been a struggle, and I think just making sure that you have some options in place could be beneficial to the Jets and ideally beneficial for Garrett Wilson, who we care about the most in that Jets offense. So how about you, Nate? Where did you go for your number 3? Or
First, the Jets. I think that's certainly fair. I included them as a possibility for my third spot. The only thing, it was similar to why I didn't include the Washington running backs, and that's because I don't think the Jets will draft a quarterback this year. They have 3 first-round picks in 2027. I think they are planning on drafting a quarterback in 2027, and because of that, I think they would rather use their 2026 picks to help at other positions. So the only reason I didn't include them, not because the Jets don't need a potential quarterback of the future, but because I don't think this is the year that they will get the quarterback of the future, where I think other teams are a little more likely to draft a quarterback. The Arizona Cardinals are the team that I ended up with third. It sounds like they're going to go with Jacoby Brissett as their starter. They added Gardner Minshew as a backup option. Brissett's going to be 34 by the start of the season, so they are a team that needs a quarterback of the future. And I think they were kind of the one destination for me where if things aren't going well by the middle point of the season, if they draft a rookie quarterback, that rookie quarterback could end up being the starter over the second half of the season. So because they were the only other team I could really think of that has that situation where a rookie could come in and take over in the middle of the season if things aren't going well. That's what was the tiebreaker that led Arizona for me to be third. But I also mentioned teams like the Rams, the Packers, the Buccaneers, all teams that need a backup quarterback right now. The Rams probably ahead of the others because Matthew Stafford, this could be his last year potentially. So the Rams need a quarterback of the future. But Packers, Buccaneers, other teams that need a backup quarterback, and if something were to happen to Love or Mayfield over the course of the season, then the rookie would be in a position to succeed with all the players that they have around them in those offenses.
Yeah, that's the thing with this last spot. Like, I feel like whoever is already on the roster right now, like is going to be fine for 2026, and it's just a matter of, if that player just goes, has a terrible season or gets injured or something like that, or we're looking at a potential, succession plan for the future, something like that. Because Arizona was on my list. Cleveland is on the list as well. New Orleans, well, I put like just as a later name on the list. Like I think Tyler Shuck was fine as a rookie, but I don't think he's necessarily a franchise quarterback. We'll see. I said Arizona, right? You said Arizona. The other one too, like Miami. They signed Malik Willis. We'll see what happens on that one. Quinn Ewers is the backup, but Malik Willis also kind of an unknown as far as being a true NFL starter. So I think you kind of increase your chances of unknowns by adding another rookie quarterback. Maybe this isn't again the best spot for right away, but I feel like outside of those top 3-ish or top 2 even that we talked about, Raiders and Steelers, like and considering the rookie class as well, like it's not ideal for anyone. But I think, Miami could be in consideration as well. I don't think that'll necessarily happen this year anyways, but just wanted to put them out there. We'll see what happens with Malik Willis. But again, just looking at teams that kind of have unknowns at the quarterback position, Miami at least came to mind. All right. We'll go on to the other positions, Nate, in a second here. But first, I want to let everybody know that our game plan of the week is presented by Western and Southern Financial Group, a game plan for your financial future. And obviously, in the off season, we've been talking a lot about, early 2026 prep and rookie prep and projecting for, the upcoming season to kind of put ourselves in the best position possible to win an eventual fantasy championship in the near future. So that's obviously what our game plan is all about when it comes to the fantasy off season. But you too should make sure you have your own game plan, whether in beginning very early prep for a 2026 championship or for life in general. Just like every team win starts with a great game plan, your future should too. The life insurance, with life insurance built like a championship roster, Western and Southern helps protect you and your family so you could focus on winning today, knowing tomorrow is covered. Whether you're just starting out, building your dynasty, or looking to lock in long-term protection, their coverage options are designed to match your game plan. Visit westernsouthern.com/PFF to get your free life quote and start building your financial game plan today. Western and Southern, built to win, backed by over 130 years of helping people protect what matters most. All right, Nate, let's talk about the wide receiver position. We went back to a top 5 list of potential landing spots here for wide receivers. I definitely felt like, I'm with you. I think there were more spots that I could have come up with for wide receiver than running back and even quarterback. So I'll be interested in what was your number 1 spot for the wide receiver position.
Yeah, it's also nice with wide receiver because with running back and quarterback outside of Love and Mendoza, we're kind of making the assumption that the players end up doing better than expected. And that's the only way it really makes sense for some of these teams to try addressing running back and quarterback. But at wide receiver, there's plenty of wide receivers that drafting one in the first round, the second round, the third round could all end up to immediate impact players, and lots of teams that need wide receivers. I don't think any team needs a wide receiver more than the Cleveland Browns do, though. The Browns, by PFF grade last season, had the lowest graded wide receiver group, and they have the exact same top 6 players on the depth chart now that they did throughout the season, led by Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, Isaiah Bond. I think they could draft 2 wide receivers and then be the top 2 wide receivers on the depth chart potentially. So I think Cleveland probably the team that needs a wide receiver the most. Other teams at least have a number 1 wide receiver that's more reliable than the Browns' number 1 wide receiver, or have more depth than the Browns do, or invested more recently in wide receiver than the Browns have. But the Browns really haven't made too much investment in wide receiver recently, and they didn't make any investment in free agency.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're right in saying that we're going to have right away, we're going to have some similarities at the top here for the wide receiver position. Cleveland definitely is the one for me as well. Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, Malachi Corley, nobody really consistent there, at least recently. Right. So they're picking 6th, and as much as I'd love to see them, maybe get help for Myles Garrett on the edge as well, like either David Bailey or Ruben Bain, if possible, like those guys, they're also being mocked inside the top 5. I feel like wide receiver is still going to be the top priority for them. You got Carnell Tate, you got Mekhi Lemon, Jordan Tyson. I think all of those guys should be in play for the Browns with their first pick. Who knows how quarterback is going to shake out, obviously, but you're not getting a new quarterback this season. So you worry about that, next year right now. And at this point, you take a top weapon for that eventual QB1, whether that's Shedeur Sanders who emerges, Deshaun Watson who bounces back to form, or whoever it ends up being. But I think wide receiver, I'm with you, Nate. I think that's the top spot for me, as well is the Cleveland Browns. So we'll see if our number 2 is the same as well, Nate. Who do you got?
I wouldn't be all that surprised. It's the Raiders for me at number 2. Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers were the top 2 wide receivers for the Raiders 2 years ago. Traded both of them away. So Trey Tucker emerged as the top wide receiver on the depth chart. They drafted 2 wide receivers last year in Thornton and Besh. Neither of them performed all that well as rookies. I think there's still a chance that they are able to improve this season and be more involved in the offense, which is a big reason why they're number 2 and not number 1. They did add Jalen Nailor in free agency. Nailor has been the 3rd wide receiver for the Vikings. I think he is a fine number 2 or number 3 option, but right now, at least for me, he's penciled in as the top wide receiver on the depth chart. So I think wide receiver makes a ton of sense for the Raiders. The only thing is because they invested in wide receiver a lot in the draft last year. We'll see how much they invest in it this year, but I think there's that clear path for there to be a number 1 wide receiver on the team. And if they don't believe in their wide receivers they drafted last year, I think they are another team that could draft 2 wide receivers again this year, and both of them be among the top 3 on the depth chart.
Yeah. Same pick, Nate. Say also the Raiders here, and Raiders and Browns really I look at like 1A and 1B, but I think with the Browns, they have the more likely chance to spend a first round pick on a wide receiver. So that's why they get the edge for me as well. But yeah, Raiders are right there. Like you said, Jack Bash, Dante Thornton, Trey Tucker, Jalen Nailor. Obviously, round 1 pick is going to be quarterback. Can they immediately pair their new quarterback with a solid wide receiver prospect, maybe at the start of round 2? Omar Cooper Jr. Of Indiana, he's kind of being mocked as like a fringe round 1, round 2 pick. I would love, seeing him kind of reunite with Mendoza as well. Maybe one of the other potential first rounders falls into that range, whether it's, Denzel Boston or Casey Concepcion. Like if they like those guys, then that's probably a must here at the start of the second round. After that, it just depends on who they like. But they, to make life easier on Mendoza really is the most important part. And I think they have to invest in the wide receiver position still. So I'm with you. I wouldn't be surprised if they spent multiple picks on the wide receiver position, ideally 1 in the second round. We'll see who's available to them and what makes sense. But I mean, what does definitely make sense is they need wide receiver help right now. So yeah, we got the same top 2. Who do you got at number 3, Nate?
I have the Jets at number 3. Garrett Wilson is the clear top wide receiver for them, so they do have a top option. But to be fair, the Browns and Raiders do have top receiving options. They're just at tight end rather than wide receiver. The Jets had 8 different wide receivers run at least 150 routes last season. Half of them are already off the roster. Adonai Mitchell and Isaiah Williams were the second and third wide receivers, at least currently on the depth chart. Neither of them were on the team even to start last season. And then Arian Smith's the fourth wide receiver on the depth chart right now. He led the team in routes while only catching 7 passes, which is pretty remarkable. So the Jets, another team where they don't need a number 1 wide receiver, but they could use a number 2 wide receiver. They could use a number 3 wide receiver. They do have a decent number of picks early in the draft. So multiple opportunities to get wide receivers. I wouldn't be surprised if they get one. And like we mentioned earlier, probably planning on getting a quarterback next year. So the more weapons they can get that for that quarterback now, the better. So I would not be surprised if they draft at least 1 wide receiver, if not multiple wide receivers. And I think there's a chance that this team could have 2 fantasy relevant wide receivers, because I don't think they'll have a fantasy relevant tight end. Breece Hall's there at running back and can catch some passes, but I don't think he'll be the number 2 receiving options if they invest heavily enough in a wide receiver.
Yeah, I like the Jets spot. They're on my list. They weren't 3, but I put a team with similar kind of ideas, like looking for a wide receiver too in that offense at my number 3 spot here, and that was the New Orleans Saints. They got Chris Olave as the clear kind of wide receiver 1. They added Travis Etienne for the backfield this offseason. We'll see what happens with Kamara, but also an offense that I think, depending on what happens with quarterback, like I said, Tyler Shuck, who knows if he's going to be, the franchise guy or not. But I think if you find that out by adding more pieces for him to be, to use as weapons in that offense, in Kellen Moore's offense, where we've seen Kellen Moore have success, in the passing game, especially before as a play caller. So I think there's potential there for somebody else next to Chris Olave to have success. I know they got Devon Vele, who they added last season during the year, and he's been fine. They got other guys like Mason Tipton. They've taken a shot on like Jalen Polk. Like there's not really like that clear wide receiver 2 for me next to Olave, and I think having a consistent option in that passing game, I think has potential there. So yeah, I'm with you. Like I think the Jets, the Saints, not to spoil it, but I think there's some other teams as well where wide receiver 2 makes a lot of sense to add in this draft and to have some potential. And then the Saints were just kind of the one for me that I think I would have liked to see the most right now.
Fair. I had the Saints 5th on my list. The only reason that they were a little bit lower for me is I still have a little bit of faith in Vele of potentially emerging as a clear number 2 option. He has graded well, just not on the largest sample size. He really didn't do much most of last season, but the last 4 weeks before he suffered an injury, he was getting a bit more involved in the offense and finding success there. So because I think there's still a chance he could emerge as the number 2 wide receiver, they weren't quite as high for me on the list. But like you said, a definite need for at least a third wide receiver there who could see significant playing time and eventually surpass Bailey on the depth chart. And then I thought it was also worth mentioning that rookie wide receiver could end up being the leader in targets on the team at the end of the season, because Chris Olave does have that history of concussions that scared a lot of people from drafting him last season in fantasy drafts. But just because he didn't have a concussion last year doesn't mean that history of concussions isn't there. So there's still some risk with Olave. Juwan Johnson, the tight end, who's been playing well, but he will be 30 before the start of the season. Kellen Moore is historically limited running backs in the passing game. So if Olave were to suffer a concussion, there's a chance that a rookie drafted by the Saints could end up leading the team in targets at the end of the season. So even though I think there's a chance they could be third on the depth chart to start the season, there is a chance of that really high upside situation with the Saints.
Thanks. Yeah. So same page there, Nate. For number 4 for you, who did you end up going with?
4, I put the Tennessee Titans. They have similar to the Raiders in that they have 4 guys who are penciled in as the top 4 on the depth chart. And I was a little concerned putting them in because they drafted 2 wide receivers last year, but there's a clear need for a number 1 wide receiver because they have Calvin Ridley, who only has 1 season with a PFF grade above 75. So he is much better suited as a number 2 option. Wan'Dale Robinson, they added in free agency. He's been a better slot option. He did get more involved with the Giants offense last year, year, but he's not a number one wide receiver. They drafted the 2 wide receivers in the 4th round last year, but I was a little more okay including them, similar to the Raiders, because they did change coaching staff. So it's not the same coaches who drafted these wide receivers that are currently coaching them. So there's a chance that Humanor or DK could get more involved in the offense and potentially emerge as a number one option. So it's a little weird in that if they draft a wide receiver and wait for the 2nd or 3rd round, that wide receiver might start the season 5th on the depth chart, but there's definitely a lot of room to move up that wide receiver. So Tennessee was the 4th option for me.
Yep, they are the 4th option for me as well, Nate. It's just, I'm with you. Like Wan'Dale Robinson, nice little addition there, not necessarily a wide receiver 1. Calvin Ridley has not really been a wide receiver 1, really, outside of small spurts in his career. Eliku Umanor, I think, is fine, but more of a depth option. Same thing, Chimere DK, special teams guy as well. So they're picking 4th. I mean, maybe they like one of these wide receivers enough to spend a top 5 pick on them, in which case, yeah, they would absolutely be the wide receiver 1. They obviously invested the 1st overall pick in Cam Ward last year. You want to make sure that you have the weapons for him. Yeah, everything you said, I'm in 100% agreement with Nate. I think Tennessee still makes sense as a team that absolutely should be looking to add a true wide receiver 1 to this offense, and surround Cam Ward with the best offense that they can. And I think he's just missing that wide receiver 1 right now. I think you can make an argument that maybe a tight end as well, but I think wide receiver definitely the more valuable position. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. So I'm with you. I think Tennessee is absolutely in that spot. So really, so far, only the one difference for us in here so
just
far.
The
so
ordering,
just the ordering, right? So I'll just go with my 5th one here, because I'm thinking it's maybe a little bit different, because I'm thinking long term. But I went with the Denver Broncos. Courtland Sutton has been solid, but there's I think little consistency from the rest of the wide receiver group. And, as much as I love Troy Franklin, and I think Pat Bryant, has potential, they haven't been, I guess, like overly encouraging so far. So I think there's still reason to add there. They're drafting late 1st, late 2nd. I think late 1st could be really fun depending on who they like in that range. Like, I think there's potential there in Denver to continue improving that offense, because obviously the defense has been the strength of that roster over the past couple of seasons. The offense has been good, but I think it could be even better. And I think what it's missing is at least some consistency at the wide receiver position, arguably outside of Courtland Sutton, because he has been good. But I think, whoever it ends up being at the end of the 1st, because that's where I'm kind of picturing them drafting. Outside of that, I don't know that there's necessarily a great option, like end of the 2nd, end of the 3rd. We'll see. But end of the 1st round pick, I think for Denver, adding a wide receiver there, I think could be fun. And I think could be somebody that emerges, as wide receiver 2 this season, potentially as a wide receiver 1 in future seasons for that offense, if they hit. So yeah, Denver kind of just made the cut for me. How do you feel about them? And then what's your number 5? I guess your number 5 was Saints. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, my 5 was the Saints, but I agree the Broncos were right there for me. I definitely considered putting them at 5. They're an interesting team in that Sutton's been there. He's been consistent. He's been the number 1 guy, but they could probably use a better number 1 guy. I think the one thing that led me to not include them is because Pat Bryant, as a rookie, rated decently well, especially with where he was drafted as a rookie. So I think he can continue to improve and at least be that number 2 guy in the offense. So I think they have at least 2 of their top 3 guys. Marvin Mims has done fine at times, even though they won't give him more playing time for whatever reason, unless it's the playoffs. So we'll see if he gets more playing time this year, but I do think they could add a wide receiver, and that could definitely help their offense and potentially move on from Sutton eventually and have Pat Bryant and some other guy be the top 2 guys in the offense long term. But because the Saints had a more clear need at wide receiver, but the Broncos potentially a better landing spot with Bo Nix at quarterback.
Nice. Yeah. So, did you have one other team in your top 5 that we didn't cover? That was
it. Through all my 5.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Nice. Okay. So there's other spots, like I think Washington, looking at teams that also could maybe use like a wide receiver too, just like honorable mentions, like Atlanta, I think is one that only have really Drake London right now. And then, Washington also across from Terry McLaurin. Deebo Samuel still a free agent. Um, yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens in Philadelphia with the AJ Brown situation. Maybe there's some movement there. If he goes, then maybe there's another need for another wide receiver. Baltimore, I was looking at like Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Devontae Walker, like those are the guys. But again, maybe could use some help there. But yeah, it didn't really make the cut for me. So those were our top picks. But Nate, let's wrap it up with the tight ends now. We did, again, top three spots for the tight end, just like the quarterback position, because it is a smaller position group. Yeah, I'll be interested to know who your number one is for the tight ends.
Yeah, a little part of the reason why Denver wasn't included at number 5 wide receiver is I did put Denver as my number 1 for tight end.
Okay.
I think tight end, there was just a little bit of movement at tight end in free agency, a lot of movement in terms of blocking tight ends, but most of the teams have a receiving tight end, either the receiving tight end that they had last year or they brought in a new receiving tight end. So no clear and obvious team like there was at wide receiver, but I think Denver, Evan Ingram didn't really pan out last year. Only had one game with more than 45 receiving yards, only one touchdown on the season. He's going to be 32 years old before the start of the season. So I think there's definitely a need for a receiving tight end. It might be difficult for them to overtake Evan Ingram immediately, but again, being the tight end for Bo Nix, I think would be very valuable. Sean Payton has had a lot of tight ends that have had some sort of fantasy value, even though their playing time has always been limited. So that's always been frustrated that their ceiling's been capped a little bit, but I think they're still capable of drafting a tight end and for them being a fantasy starting tight end in Denver. So even though they're not the team that I think maybe most absolutely needs one, I think in this case, the opportunity to play in this offense with this coach, with this quarterback, with some limited opportunities at wide receiver, that's what led me to put Denver as my top spot.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. Denver was not in my top 3, but they were on my list as potential options as well. Yeah, I'm like, it's interesting, right? We'll talk about it eventually, but I'm not like overly excited about this tight end class. So that I think I struggle with this one a little bit because there's really only 2 guys that I was looking for potential spots to come in and be fantasy assets, right? But I think, one of the ones that stood out to me too was Miami. Now they're drafting 11th overall in the first round, so they're not going to spend a tight end there, pick on a tight end there. But 43rd, so second round, I think could be a nice spot for a potential tight end. Obviously, they had Darren Waller, they had some success with him last year, but it's a new coaching staff as well. So we'll see, how that offense runs and how important the tight end position becomes for them. But I think there could be somebody, whether it is Kenyon Sadiq, who I guess is likely going to be a first round pick, but Stowers as well. Eli Stowers, I liked a fair bit, and he's been somebody that's moved up in the consensus mock drafts as well. He was like 80th a few weeks ago. He's moved up to like 49th. So he's kind of in that range there for Miami to be a potential option on the board for a position in need. So Miami was one for me that I think there could be some need there, especially with just really Jalen Waddle as the top receiving option. They let Tyreek Hill go. So if they could bring in a receiving type tight end, then there could be some fantasy production out of that spot.
Fair. I did not include Miami in my top 3, but they were if I extended the list beyond that. The reason I didn't is Greg Dulcich did re-sign with Miami, and he graded fairly well as a receiver last season, an 80.6 receiving grade, which was among the top 12 for tight ends. So it was on a relatively small sample size. He only played 10 games for them, only had 31 targets. So because it's a small sample size, they could definitely move on to a different tight end. But he did play well given the opportunities. And while it is a new head coach, Bobby Slowick's the offensive coordinator. He was an assistant there last year with Greg playing well. So wouldn't be surprised if that is the at least short-term plan for a tight end for Miami this season. And I think he is someone who can be a fantasy sleeper, not someone you want to draft to be a starter, but in the late rounds of drafts, I think there are definitely worse tight ends that you can get that are starting tight ends in the NFL.
That's fair. Yeah. Okay. Who did you have as your number 2 landing spot for tight ending?
Number 2 is Carolina. I think them and Denver were the 2 teams for me that definitely need a receiving tight end. They have Tommy Tremble and Jatavian Sanders. Out of all the tight ends to run at least 500 routes over the last 2 seasons, they have the 2 worst grades out of the 37 tight ends in terms of receiving. So I think they have the biggest need for a tight end in that they don't have someone who's shown that they can be a starter. The only reason I had Carolina lower than Denver is because Dave Canales doesn't have a strong history of throwing to tight ends in the past. Ideally, having a better tight end would improve that, but that's only the main reason why they were number 2 rather than number 1, even though I think there's a more immediate need for a receiving tight end in Carolina than Denver.
Sure, yeah, Carolina was number 3 for me as well, Nate. Like I think where they're picking, 19th, 51st in those first 2 rounds, like there's kind of good spots for whichever tight end they like the most. I think depending on how they view that as a need, like you said, the reason they dropped for me is just I don't know how much of a need it is for that offense in particular, the tight end position. But I'm with you. I could see them being a great spot as well if there is somebody that emerges there as a really solid option in Carolina. But yeah, I also like, I still don't mind Jatavian Sanders, but I know he hasn't been great. So there's the reason they cracked the top 3, but also the reason they weren't number 2 for me, because I put number 2 as Tennessee. Again, not going to be a first round pick. 4th overall is where they're drafting, but they're also drafting early 2nd round. There's some and early 3rd round, depending on who's available. Like they lost Chico Conquo this past off season, and then they brought in Daniel Bellinger as well for Brian Dable's offense, and I think is he's fine. I don't necessarily know that he's like a tight end 1. So if they do find somebody that they really like, I don't think that should stop them from adding at the position. They do have a bunch of tight ends on the roster though. So I'm not in love with the spot. I'm not in love with any of the spots really for tight end, just because I also don't think there's any locked, a real lock for fantasy potential in this tight end class. But I could see Tennessee again, just on the same kind of rationale of adding weapons to Cam Ward's offense. I think if they were to bring in somebody that isn't a wide receiver, then tight end also makes sense here. So Tennessee just kind of made the cut for me as well, but none of these teams I'm really overly excited about. But how do you feel about Tennessee? And I guess who's your last pick for the group?
Yeah, I definitely considered Tennessee because they were the one team that lost a receiving tight end and didn't add a clear receiving tight end. Yeah. But similar to Washington at running back, the fact that they've added a couple of guys at tight end told me that they probably aren't planning on drafting a tight end. So that's why I didn't include them in my top 3, because one, they added Daniel Bellinger, who was with Brian Dable back with the Giants. So there's definitely experience there. So I think he'll be one of the top 3 tight ends. Connor Helm will at least be one of the top 3 tight ends. They added Kylan Granson, the former Eagles tight end, and before that was with the Colts. So I could make the roster. And then David Martin Robinson graded well as a blocking tight end. So I'm not sure like they could add a tight end and probably have 4 on the roster the entire season. But the fact that they have added 2 recently when they had 2 decent young tight ends last season suggests to me that they aren't going to get one. So I still had to get creative with my 3rd tight end spot because, like you said, lots of teams already have the receiving tight end, but I went with the Kansas City Chiefs for my 3rd tight end spot. One, Travis Kelce is the oldest tight end in the NFL, so a very good chance that he retires at the end of the season, and they need a tight end of the future. But also Kansas City, it's in the top 3 in terms of teams that use 12 personnel on passing downs over the past 2 seasons. The other 2 teams, the Ravens with Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, and then the Raiders with Bowers and Michael Mayer. With Kansas City, Noah Gray's been that 2nd tight end option, but he hasn't graded all that well as a receiver. With the addition of Kenneth Walker, I could see them using 12 personnel even more. And we have seen the past 2 years, anytime that they were lighter at wide receiver, whether it was an injury or something, that they ended up using more 12 personnel. So they are a team that is a little thin at wide receiver right now. So we could see the Kansas City Chiefs being the team that uses 12 personnel the most on passing downs out of any team, because Baltimore has a new coaching staff, doesn't have Likely anymore. A chance the Raiders are also up there in terms of how often they pass the ball in 12 personnel. But I think Kansas City, based on what they've done in the past, could very well be there. And if they invest in a rookie tight end, that would make sense for them to use that a lot on passing downs as well. So while it's very rare for a team to have two fantasy relevant tight ends at the same time, it's at least possible. So we could see a tight end, especially in deeper leagues, emerging there. And then beyond 2026 being the tight end of the future for Kansas City, catching passes from Patrick Mahomes when they throw more to tight ends than anyone else, in part because they've had Kelsey. But we could see another tight end still being a very significant part of the offense in the future.
Yep, makes sense. Like you said, Kelsey not likely to play beyond this year. I was, wasn't even sure that he was going to play this season, but he's back. So maybe this does feel like the last season for him. And yeah, you got at least a succession plan there. And yeah, tight end was tough because Philly brought back Dallas Goedert on a 1-year deal. Tampa Bay brought back Cade Otton on a 3-year deal. Even Washington, I thought was a potential spot. They signed Chico Okonkwo. The Giants signed Isaiah Likely, right? So there was spots that could have been good, but they all kind of got filled up in free agency. So yeah, I found tight end was a tough one, but yeah, I like those picks that we kind of highlighted, but maybe other people have other ideas. So let us know in the comments as well. But that's going to do it for today. So thank you all for tuning in. If you're watching on the YouTube, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts as well. We'd greatly appreciate that. But Nate, thank you to you as well. Please do let everybody know what you got going on over at pff.com.
Sure. With free agency pretty much done, I did update my rankings. You can see all the rankings on the website, but also had the PPR rankings in article form go up on Monday. Also had a recap of all of free agency. I know I had a couple of different articles last week recapping different days of free agency, but have an overall one up now that covers everything and updates everything for all the moves that happened. Also, if you want to see this in article form, we'll have this in article form up later this week, and then we'll continue covering rankings, start covering the rookies a whole lot more starting next week as well. So definitely starting to look more and more at the rookie class and looking at dynasty stuff.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Yeah, we're going to cover a lot of rookie stuff in the weeks ahead, obviously leading up to the NFL draft and then afterwards as well as people are doing their rookie draft. So yeah, tune in for all of that. And then for me, what do we got? I got this week how each running back in this 2026 class performed by different situations. So against stacked boxes from zone or man run concepts or gap scheme run concepts. On third downs and receiving downs. So it kind of breaks down how everybody performed in this class in those different situations. That'll be an article over on pff.com. Going to do the same thing with the wide receivers and their different situations. We've done that for the past few years for both of those positions. And yeah, just providing some extra detail and context for how these running backs and wide receivers produced in their college careers. And then I'll be doing the updated versions of the rookie models as well as updated draft capital, expected draft capital that comes in and just kind of updating their scores and then adding some more players and in-depth analysis on their prospect profiles as well as yeah, we get closer and closer to the NFL draft. So make sure you check those all out at pff.com. But thank you everybody for tuning in. And until next time, peace out.